Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to use my outside voice, okay? Can everybody hear me? I need to start with a couple of public service announcements. First of all, I want to thank Catherine for making it so that I'm not the first person who will drop an F-bomb tonight. And now I have a beef to pick with Brad, because I didn't get an offer of homemade pickles. And I'm a homemade pickles kind of guy. I'll take that up with Brad later. So, I'm Glen Kirchner. I am a retired career federal prosecutor. I started as an Army JAG prosecuting court-martial cases back in the 80s. I joined the Department of Justice after about 6.5 years active duty and spent about a quarter of a century prosecuting essentially and mainly murder and RICO cases in the courts of Washington, D.C., and as Chief of Homicide at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, supervising all murder investigations and all homicide grand jury investigations. And I may not know much, but there's one thing I know, and it's the rule of law. And let me also say, this feels like home. I'm a Virginia guy. You know, I went to school up the street at Washington and Lee University. My wife went to UVA. One of my 5 daughters went to UVA. My son went to UVA. My wife went to Richmond Law. I raised all 5 of my girls in Fairfax County and Annandale. Put them all through public schools in Fairfax County. So this is home for me. I live in Leesburg now, but boy, I love your little town here. And that's not pandering, I really do. And I appreciate what Brad and everybody else did to put this together. And I tend to be long-winded. So I told Brad, if you got a hook or you need to raise the music to play me off, go ahead and do that. But I want to talk about the rule of law, and this is kind of ambitious because I want to try to talk about 4 separate areas of the rule of law. 3 that I think involve points of life. You know, we talk all the time about the horrible, horrible, lawless, unconstitutional shit Donald Trump and his flunkies are doing to the American people. But I think the points of light tend to get buried amidst the Trump-induced darkness. One of the reasons I left mainstream media after 6.5 years as an on-air legal analyst with MSNBC, and I love my friends and colleagues at MSNBC, is because, you know, they continue to focus on the darkness. I turned on cable news and I saw Donald Trump bloviating and lying and spewing his propaganda into the public square for a full hour when he met with the UK Prime Minister. And I'm saying to myself, why is corporate media, legacy media, giving him this uninterrupted platform to poison our minds? Why? One of the reasons I actually asked to be released from my MSNBC contract 6 months early, and they graciously agreed with some provisions that I had to sign off on. I was happy to do it. And so as an experiment, I'm actually live streaming this to Substack, which is 100% independent. No corporate sponsorship, no commercials run on content. You can go, I'm not plugging my Substack account, I promise, but you can go there and subscribe to me for free. I don't put anything behind a paywall. Go there, you can get all my content. So independent media, it's us. It's direct to the people, you know, in real time when they need it. So let me get to the rule of law in the cases I want to talk about. I want to start with how we know by now that nobody is going to save us. No one judge is going to save us. No one prosecutor is going to save us. No one politician is going to save us. Believe me, if the Democrats, if the politicians could have saved us, they would have saved us already. Many of them we're fighting like hell every day, but no politician is going to save us. You know who's going to save us. We are going to save us. We are going to save us. We're all we've got. And that's why you all are here. And that's why we're doing this every damn day, because we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I believe we're going to save us. So let me talk about a few of the cases kicking around and why I believe they're points of light, and why I never thought I would say this, but the federal court judges, the trial court judges, and the federal circuit courts of appeal are protecting us against a criminal, corrupt, abusive president of the United States. The federal judges are protecting us, and I know what y'all are saying, Glenn, but the Supreme Court. And I'm with you, but the Supreme Court. We've got 6 radical right-wing ideologues who are forever trying to do a solid for Donald Trump, contrary to the language of the Constitution. You know, I don't pretend to be a constitutional scholar, but you know who is? A gentleman named Akil Reed Amar. He's a Yale law professor. He's a constitutional expert. And when the Supreme Court, those 6 right-wing ideologues, granted Donald Trump absolute presidential immunity, Akil Reed Amar said, what the Supreme Court just did was rule that the Constitution is unconstitutional. And boy, he hit the nail right on the head. Because the Constitution says a president must take care to faithfully execute the laws of the country. That's kind of the opposite of the president can violate the laws of the country, victimize the American people with complete impunity and immunity. I can read, I may have been born and gone through public schools in New Jersey, but I can read. And the Constitution says the exact opposite of what the Supreme Court did in the presidential immunity case. But we're going to survive the Supreme Court too. Let me talk about the first batch of cases. And it has to do with the law firms. Near and dear to my heart, right? I'm a lawyer, my wife's a lawyer, place is lousy with lawyers. But the law firms that stood up to Donald Trump beat the pants off of him in federal court. And there were 4 separate federal court cases where the law firms that Donald Trump tried to unconstitutionally punish using executive orders, saying things like, your lawyers are prohibited from entering federal courthouses. You don't need to be a constitutional scholar to recognize that's lawless and unconstitutional. And 4 federal judges ruled that that's lawless and unconstitutional. 2 of those judges were appointed by Republican presidents. So Donald Trump might try to call them angry, radical, left-wing, lunatic judges. No, and I don't believe that of judges who were appointed by Republicans or by Democrats. They, in my experience, 30 years appearing before judges in military courts and civilian courts, in federal courts and local courts, in trial courts and appellate courts, once they put on the black robe, most of them leave their ideology at the door. The overwhelming majority, with some exceptions that I won't name except Eileen Cannon. Because Donald Trump would be serving a sentence in the classified documents case right now if it wasn't for Eileen Cannon. Right. Believe me, based on the evidence. Yeah. And here's the thing, friends, this is where we have to find points of light and hope where we can. That case is not necessarily over. When Donald Trump leaves office, keep an eye on the classified documents case. Because he committed those crimes not when he was president, but when he was a private citizen, so he doesn't have presidential immunity. And we'll get around the statute of limitations, don't worry. I can't wait to go back to government, I swear. If Kamala Harris won, as I hoped and prayed that she would, I would be back in government right now and I wouldn't be allowed to talk to you, because for 30 years I wasn't allowed to speak publicly. So you can tell this is very liberating for me now that I can. You can't stop me from running my mouth now. So I want to talk about the law firm cases briefly. There were law firms that stood up to Donald Trump's unconstitutional executive orders. And there were law firms that crawled into the Oval Office on their big white privileged bellies and gave Donald Trump their lunch money without a fight. Thinking what? They're now gonna be protected? They're gonna be in Donald Trump's good graces because we know he never throws people under the bus. What a miscalculation if they thought that was going to help their bottom line, their profit margin. No, you know what? Big clients like McDonald's, it doesn't get much bigger than McDonald's, are fleeing the law firms that gave Donald Trump their lunch money, that bent the knee, that capitulated, because they say to themselves, if you all can't fight for yourselves, you're not going to be able to fight for me. And McDonald's, it's a pretty big client. In fact, I celebrated that development by stopping at a drive-thru and getting a big-ass chocolate shake. That's the way I support McDonald's. But the law firms that stood strong, went to court, they kicked Donald Trump's ass in court, one after another, after another. The law firms that capitulated made it more dangerous for all of us because they emboldened your leader. They emboldened the aspiring dictator. They emboldened the bully. It proves the point that we have to stand up. We can't bend the knee. We can't obey in advance. As Timothy Snyder says, we fight and we fight and we fight peacefully, and that's not a punchline. Always peacefully. Let them overreach. And friends, I wish I could walk away from my justice juices get flowing. Donald Trump will deploy the military to the streets. Unfortunately, he's already done it in LA. He will deploy the military to the streets. What he's going to do is create chaos nationwide, just like he did in LA. He will then say there's so much chaos. I have to declare martial law. I have to invoke the Insurrection Act. I have to deploy the military to the streets, to which I would say, you, sport, are the one who created the chaos. That doesn't give you the right to now militarize the streets of America, but he's going to try to do it. And the reason I go to this now is because we will fight peacefully. But we all know in his first term, he just had this zeal for having the military shoot people in the legs. Nobody made that up. That was his former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, who said he wants the military to shoot people in the legs. And Esper said it was both a question, can they do it, and a suggestion, his words. So we know he's itching to perpetrate violence against us, and that's why we will remain peaceful. I don't want to get clocked in the head with a nightstick or a billy club, but I will. I will if that's what it takes. We will remain peaceful. He will not. He will overreach, and that will make us stronger when he does that. I absolutely believe it will make, you know what, if John Lewis and company can fight for civil rights, we can fight for the viability of our democracy. Yeah. So the law firm cases, I think, are the first example of how when we fight, we win. That's why we fight. The second case I want to talk about is the undocumented immigrants. This is where my voice starts to quake. When we see Donald Trump's, and I worked with police officers my whole life, my whole career, and I have great respect for the officers and the agencies I worked with. And as a prosecutor in DC, it's a really unusual jurisdiction because you can't swing a cat without hitting officers from 3 separate federal agencies. Right? I mean, I worked with the Metropolitan Police Department. Those are the local police officers in DC and the homicide detectives. But I also worked with FBI and ATF and DEA and Park Police and Capitol Police and Secret Service Uniform Division and United States Marshal Service and the postal inspectors, the Postal Police, the Amtrak Police, the Metro Police, the Smithsonian Police. All right, it didn't work so much with the Smithsonian Police. Hey, don't touch that painting. And I have great respect. Why? Because in my lived experience, the overwhelming majority of police officers are protect and serve kind of people. But these ICE agents and these people that they're bringing on, including former J6 defendants as play ICE agents, they're not respecting the constitutional rights of undocumented folk. They're not. So what do we have? We have federal judges protecting us. Because in California, a trial court judge ruled that when these, masked thugs are running through Home Depot parking lots and 7-Eleven parking lots and produce fields in the garment district, tackling somebody because they look Hispanic, putting a knee on their neck because they're speaking Spanish or with a Spanish accent. That's unconstitutional. The Fourth Amendment, it's my favorite amendment, I'm a constitutional geek, I admit. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Shall not. It doesn't say citizens' rights, it says the people's right. And the Supreme Court has said over and over and over and over again, undocumented folk are people, and they have those rights. And so a trial court judge said, when y'all are running through parking lots tackling folks who look like immigrants, that's an unconstitutional seizure in violation of the Fourth Amendment. When you put your hands on somebody, you put them to the ground, you put your knee on their neck, that's a seizure as defined in the law. And then the appeals court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, looked at that injunction saying you can't effing do that anymore. ICE, executive branch, Donald Trump, DOJ. The appeals court said, you're damn right, and affirmed that preliminary injunction. That is the federal judges protecting us against an unconstitutional, abusive president of the United States. Those are points of light, those federal rulings. And I don't know that we see a lot of this in corporate media, legacy media. We see all the bad, we see all the horrible, we see all the stuff that keeps eyeballs on the screen. But there's a lot of good out there. There's a whole federal judiciary, but the Supreme Court, protecting us against a criminal president. Third case that I want to talk about is the birthright citizenship case. And this is where we get to the Supreme Court, but there's even a point of light. It's not shining from the Supreme Court bench, but there's a workaround here. So Donald Trump thought he could take his tiny little fingers. That's the juvenile Jersey guy coming out. His tiny, minute little fingers. Take his Sharpie and cross out of the Constitution the guarantee of birthright citizenship. The first judge to address this in a court of law within weeks of Donald Trump taking office and trying to cross out a constitutional right is a judge named John Coffenauer out west. And he said, and I quote, what Donald Trump did is blatantly unconstitutional. And do you know who appointed John Coffenauer to the federal bench? Ronald Reagan. Radical lunatic left-wing judge. And so then there was a nationwide injunction put in place saying, well, if it's unconstitutional as to one, it's unconstitutional as to all. What did the Supreme Court do? I always hear the Jerry Seinfeld Soup Nazi episode in my head that says, no nationwide injunctions for you. To which I said, if it's unconstitutional as to one, why isn't it unconstitutional as to all, and it warrants a nationwide injunction? The Supreme Court said essentially no, and this is where the F-bomb is coming, Catherine, thank you again. Said no. If you have the means to hire a lawyer, go into court, argue your case, make your point that you're about to give birth to somebody on U.S. soil and that person will be a U.S. citizen under the Constitution, and Donald Trump can't revoke that. If you have the money and the means and the ability to do that, well then good. You can get protection too. But everybody else can't because we don't like nationwide injunctions. You know what that translates to? I spend a lot of time on my YouTube channel, Justice Matters. I'm not plugging my YouTube channel, but hit subscribe. That translates to the Supreme Court, 6 justices saying, fuck the little people. Fuck the little people. And guess what? We're all little people. Everyone in this room, we are all little people. But here's the good news. This is where the point of light comes out of that horrific birthright citizenship Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court left open a workaround, right? They said, well, maybe judges can accomplish something comparable by using class actions. So what did a judge, I forget his name all the time, but I want to give him props. What did Judge Joseph LaPlante in New Hampshire do? Like immediately after, not immediately, very soon after the Supreme Court handed down that fuck the little people ruling, he said, I'm certifying a class, and let me tell you who's in the class I'm certifying. Every infant born in the United States after February 20th, 2025, the day Trump tried to cancel the constitutional right, and every child yet to be born who will be born in the United States will be a citizen, because that's what the Constitution said. There's another instance of a federal judge protecting us from an abusive president of the United States. And I could see Judge LaPlante like, oh, I found a workaround. I got this. I'm going to protect the people against a criminal president. So that the federal bench, trial court judges, appellate court judges, are protecting us, protecting our rights. And then here's what I want to do. I want to give a shout out and encouragement to support the organizations that go into court all around the country every day and literally fight for us, fight for our rights. Guess what? We don't retain them as our lawyers. We don't pay them billable hours, but they're in court every day, often pro bono, fighting for us. We need to support them in whatever way you can. I don't tell people who to give money to. You know, obviously we want to support our candidates. We want to support, nonprofits that are doing the hard work of protecting our rights. So the organizations that were responsible for that class action in the birthright citizenship case are the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project, the Asian Law Caucus, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the Democracy Defenders Fund. They're in court every day protecting us and our rights, but we're not paying them. But, I donate to these folks because, they're our lawyers in a very real sense. So there are another 100 nonprofits. I always hesitate to name just a few because there are so many in court every day. Mark Elias's group, my God. My God. And we need to support them, even if it's calling and just saying, how can I help? I'll make copies to the extent copies are still a thing. I'm an old school guy, I don't know. But I'll knock on doors, I'll fundraise for you, I'll help you because you're helping us. All right, here's the last thing I want to talk about. Oh my gosh. Epstein and Maxwell. I can't finish the remarks without talking about frankly, the scandal that seems to have more legs than any other scandal, any other abuse that Donald Trump has perpetrated against us. And those legs keep kicking Donald Trump in the ass. I'm not saying that this will be the scandal that will end Trump's presidency, but there is no guarantee he survives the Epstein-Maxwell scandal. I don't breathe false hope, right? But there's no guarantee he survives it. I could spend the next hour talking about in how many ways what is going on is wrong from a career prosecutor's perspective, but I'll highlight just a few. You already know this. It's intuitive. The good news is Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche are involved in what I call distraction palooza. They're trying desperately to find a story that will distract from the train wreck that is the Epstein-Maxwell files. and his base is not having any of it. The MAGA support is eroding. Even the Republicans in Congress are bucking him now, issuing subpoenas, including to Republican attorneys general. This thing has legs, and it's a story that will not go away. But the distractions aren't working. What were the distractions in recent days? We're going to investigate Jack Smith for Hatch Act violations, which is not even a criminal statute. And that just came and went. MAGA didn't care, nobody cared, because it's bullshit. We're going to investigate Barack Obama and his administration for the 2016 review of the election, of all things Trump-Russia. Nobody cares. Came and went. The distractions are no longer working. They worked pretty effectively previously for Trump. They're not working anymore. And let me just say this. How many people has Donald Trump said he will prosecute? It started with the OG of Donald Trump's wrath. Who's that? Hillary. Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. Guess what? She hadn't been charged with shit because she didn't commit any crimes. But he's going to prosecute Hillary. He's going to prosecute Adam Schiff. He's going to prosecute Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Miles Taylor and Chris Krebs and General Milley. He's going to prosecute Letitia James. He's going to prosecute Alvin Bragg. He's going to prosecute Jack Smith and John Brennan and James Comey and Barack Obama. How many people have been prosecuted? Zero. What does that tell you? His MO is to just announce an investigation, let it seep into the public consciousness, but none of these folks committed crimes, so none of them will be indicted. None of them. And I think MAGA may be waking up to the fact that this guy might be a con man. But who knew? Who it seems to be, everybody in this room, it seems to be penetrating the cult a little bit. So let me try to, are you going to pull me off, Brad? Am I getting close? Let me talk a little bit about why the Epstein-Maxwell thing is so wrong. First of all, who indicted Jeffrey Epstein in 2019 and who indicted Ghislaine Maxwell in 2020? The Bill Barr Department of Justice, Donald Trump's Department of Justice indicted them. And in this old prosecutor's opinion, they indicted it very narrowly to protect people, including Donald Trump and all of the other men who were involved. So for him to say, oh, this is a Democratic hoax, they created these files, a sport, you indicted them. So just stop it. And then Maureen Comey, James Comey's daughter, did one bang-up job prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, she's the prosecutor's prosecutor, 10 years of experience in the Southern District of New York, U.S. Attorney's Office. And she was still a prosecutor with DOJ for the first 6 months of Donald Trump's term. But then the minute Todd Blanche said, I'm going to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell, they fired Maureen Comey. Why? I've sat down with inmates who were convicted and sentenced. Lots of them. Because I still wanted to know if they were willing to tell me the truth about bigger criminal fish. And if they were, I was willing to work with them, including giving them benefits like moving them to a facility that might be closer to their family and their friends so they can get regular visits, right? We do benefits for people if they give us truthful, accurate information about the crimes of bigger criminal fish. But the only person to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell that would know instantly, based on her universe of knowledge about the evidence in the case, Maureen Comey. So they had to fire her, wrongfully terminate her right before Todd Blanche went to sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell, together with his friend, Ghislaine Maxwell's defense attorney. Not too incestuous there, right? And he knew Ghislaine Maxwell was not going to incriminate or implicate Donald Trump. He knew it. So now we've had this series of reality show reveals from the Trump administration. We're going to unseal the grand jury transcript. Well, that's because you know what's in the grand jury transcript and have known since 2019 and 2020, and none of it touches on Donald Trump because Bill Barr's Department of Justice didn't have any witnesses talk about Donald Trump in the grand jury. So let's set that bullshit aside. Well, now we're going to reveal the Maxwell audio recordings and transcripts of Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche was Donald Trump's criminal defense attorney, who is still the keeper of Donald Trump's criminal secrets. That's the nature of attorney-client privilege. It never goes away, even when you no longer represent the client. He's still the keeper of Donald Trump's criminal secrets. We're going to reveal the Maxwell transcripts and audio recordings. Why? Well, ABC News reported today, Ghislaine Maxwell said Donald Trump did nothing wrong in all the years she knew him. Pure as the driven snow. And who is the woman who made those assertions? A convicted child sex trafficker who not only enabled Jeffrey Epstein and lots of other men to rape young girls, but she was also a hands-on perpetrator of these young girls. She was also indicted for 2 counts of perjury for lying and trying to cover up and protect Jeffrey Epstein and herself. So I don't really give a rat's ass what comes out of her mouth, because it's bullshit, it's unreliable, it's not credible, and I'm quite sure it's not corroborated by what's in the Epstein files, and that's why we need to see the Epstein files, though of course they're in DOJ's possession, so Pam Bondi, I'm sure, will, redact things selectively. But the good news, there's a point of light, and the victims of this whole horrific episode are being re-victimized day after day after day after day after day by Trump and Bondi and Blanche. And God help us if he pardons her. We always ask, what's a bridge too far? I don't know that there's a bridge too far. But, we're going to keep crossing every bridge when we come to it, and we're going to fight like hell when we get to the other side of that bridge as well. All right, and that, I think, is all I wanted to say, though I could talk about so many other Donald Trump horror shows, right? He's sitting in the Oval Office when he's not playing golf. He's sitting in the Oval Office literally signing unlawful and unconstitutional executive orders day after day after day. But let me leave you with this. This is a point of light. I hate to say that my professional home, my former professional home, the Department of Justice, is corrupt, is irredeemable, is illegitimate. There are 110,000 employees at the Department of Justice. About 4,000 or 5,000 have been wrongfully terminated or fled, because the ones who fled cannot do Donald Trump's dirty work, and I understand that. But there's still 100,000 good folk there who are doing the work of the American people, not doing the work of a criminal president or his criminal attorney general or deputy attorney general. And what's going on in court right now, in courts across the country, is not sustainable, because they're finding fewer and fewer DOJ lawyers to go into court and lie for Donald Trump and Pam Bondi the way they are being required to lie. And every time a judge says in court, I don't credit what you're saying, attorney, fill in the blank, you know what that does? That gets that attorney referred to their state bar for an ethics investigation and possible sanctions. And how many Trump lawyers have already been disbarred? A whole lot. And more are going to be disbarred. So this is not sustainable. The way Donald Trump is governing is not sustainable. It will implode. I don't know what the implosion looks like or when it comes or what rises up from the ashes, but you know what? We will be there to rebuild whatever rises up from the ashes. Because we are the ones who will save us. We are the only ones who can save us. So thank you all for the invitation. Thank you, Brad.